Tony Khan has announced that Ring of Honor TV will be on Honor Club. It was not that long ago where I feel like, it was the Full Gear, press conference where Tony Khan said he could easily do streaming, but chose not to. I guess he also said he could do a YouTube show if he wanted to, and he chose not to. It kind of gave the impression that he was holding out for, actual broadcasts where he would actually be able to, garner a rights fee. And this is not that. This is something that he could still make money off of, though, via subscription service. Is there enough interest in Ring of Honor to, warrant somebody paying an extra fee for a subscription? The show will be weekly. Ring of Honor pay-per-views will air on a 90-day delay on Honor Club. So, for instance, tonight's show, I believe, will probably be on the service in 90 days.
So they'll be there at about the same time that the next pay-per-view is coming out. This is what, there's 3 or 4 a year? Is that the
schedule? Yeah, I guess so.
I think there's only 3 a year, but it's more or less like that. I think there's about 1 a season.
Yeah, it's. I think more importantly, like this is a move that I imagine Tony might have had the option of doing maybe earlier. I have to think, unless there's some holdup with like, technologically with Honor Club that would have prevented him. But I have to imagine this wasn't necessarily the first choice. But nonetheless, I mean, it's a way for him to generate money off of ROH. And I think more importantly, I wonder if the pressure from the audience complaining about, too much of a blurring of the brands between AEW and ROH might have driven this, a bit earlier than.
Yeah, I was going to, like, the timing, I think, is maybe about that.
Yeah. Branavan informs us $9.99 is the price for Honor Club, and I'm assuming that is American dollars. So that is the latest with Ring of Honor.
I think on the one hand, the lack of a TV deal on traditional broadcasting has to be something of a disappointment. 1 year ago there was a lot of talk, not just about networks, but about your major streaming players being really interested in possibly picking up and acquiring a pro wrestling property, be it Amazon or Netflix or whatever else it might be. And you're just not really hearing that buzz, over the last few months, and given Raw ratings, given Rampage ratings, it's kind of, easy to understand why that might be. And so, yeah, it's probably not the sort of announcement that Tony was hoping to make. You have to think that if there was a much more kind of glorious sort of announcement to be made, it might have happened during the actual midway through the actual pay-per-view rather than, in the presser 45 minutes after all of the champs have come out and spoken. So yeah, it's a slightly disappointing move probably from a business sense. But all of that being said, I think kind of knowing that now in retrospect, looking at the outcomes of most of these matches that happened tonight, a lot of things make sense. You now have a number of kind of new, fresh champions who, the majority of which, Briscoes aside, sort of match up with the kind of the modern understanding of ROH and the newer, maybe originally AEW specific or recently acquired wrestlers that Tony has very clearly been wanting to present as kind of ROH people or people who bleed in well to the ROH ethos, right? Claudio, Yuta, the Embassy, certainly Athena. And if we're talking about trying to make Rampage appointment viewing again, okay, kind of clearing up some of that space and having, this like kind of Honor Club based television show for, hardcore sickos like myself, who will of course be watching it, that allows, some of your more established draws, your Moxleys, your Bryans, your Jerichos, whoever it might be, to start getting some airtime on Fridays and hopefully beginning to kind of boost up those ratings again.
You mentioned that roster, and I mean, you add Samoa in there as well, of course.
Oh, geez, yeah, of course. Geez, how could I forget?
It looks pretty attractive, like certainly, if you're guaranteed a lot of those matches mixed in with what sounds like a lot of New Japan, interaction as well. The possibility of a lot of like interesting dream matches with all of that roster. I think it's an interesting play for a subscription service. Now, ultimately, it's the initial excitement. A month from after launch is going to really dictate how much of a craving there is. But I think it's a really strong roster that you're starting off with to cater that to that hardcore audience.
Yeah, definitely. I got the sense that they were maybe hinting towards, Cobb versus Joe as something that they could, have on there. And yeah, inject that directly into my veins, please. Willow and now Athena, I think could be a really, really interesting program to have there. I'm really curious. I mean, Tony was, being pretty cryptic, at least in the parts that I've heard from the presser about this whole New Japan thing, but wanting to sort of underline that. That's really interesting. I think obviously there's a long history there between ROH and New Japan, but I'd be kind of curious as to get your thoughts as to either what sort of, ROH New Japan dream matches might you sort of already be sketching out in your head? And then also what do you think this sort of does in terms of Forbidden Door? Because Forbidden Door is still a very nascent and fluid sort of property, right? We know that the card that was delivered was not the card that was planned or intended originally. There's still millions of dream matches just with an AEW roster to sort of be done there. So if they're talking about ROH and New Japan integration, how does the occasional bit of AEW New Japan integration fit into that, do you think?
I think that you almost kind of want to have them be equivalent, which is that there are people on New Japan who are not top of the roster who still have a very lively role to play. Like you're thinking, I don't know if I'd bring like a Hiroki Goto in to do like a top of the card match. I don't know if I'd have him way up on the card at a Forbidden Door. But is he a big name to put on Ring of Honor? Oh yeah, he most definitely is. I think they've used Ishii on AEW television before, but he's another one who could come in and have a strong showing. I think that there are a few of these guys who have a ceiling in New Japan and who you're not going to put high up on a Forbidden Door, but who are going to generate interest from the people who are kind of hardcore, who are regular followers of wrestling all around, and they're going to be really interested in seeing that. And then the other thing that you could start to integrate is people from Stardom.
Yeah.
Which they've teased wanting to do for Forbidden Door 2. I think bringing some of them into Ring of Honor may be an easier way to get some stateside, including Canada, but it's all about the States. It might be a way to get them introduced to a US audience that makes it a little less abrupt than just bringing them in straight from Japan, where you could, when they've done that before, like the match with Thunder Rosa and Yamashita, that you could tell the audience, now she's not from Stardom, but you could tell the audience did not know who she was. And I think that that's probably true of a lot of the Stardom names too, other than a couple like Kairi who has a profile in already. But I can certainly see that being something that they try out there.
The fact that AEW essentially has like a pay service show now. I'm very curious to see if Tony changes his booking philosophy for that particular show. I think that's been one of the things about this whole like ROH blending into AEW. There's been no real distinction between the styles of the two brands. The fact that now you have one existing and its own little platform on its own service and people have to pay for it, does that change the way he will book when he's not booking, just to kind of capture the people watching SmackDown to stick onto your shows, when he knows that the people paying for this are already the hardest of the hardcore that wants to see everything. That's where I feel like you can get away with no introductions, no video packages. Here's like, Tomohiro Ishii. Here's like, here's the Regina the Wave Championship, and like go nuts. I'm sure like that to me is like where you kind of put your dream match scenarios that will cater. And I want to see Rampage turn more into like a casual fan sort of experience that gives a bit more of a sort of like, training wheels, for lack of a better word, explanations about who these people are, video packages, like we're seeing with Powerhouse Hobbs, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see if, like, Tony changes philosophy, and how one show existing might affect the other.
Yeah, no, it's a really, there's a lot of possibilities and opportunities here. Like, it might not be the most exciting thing from a business perspective, or if we're talking about the overall idea of, are we having another wrestling war? Is wrestling, kind of going through another boom period or whatever? It obviously doesn't speak very well to that. But yeah, I think if you are, a hardcore person who has been interested in things like the New Japan Stardom crossover, Forbidden Door, things like that, if, your eyes popped out of your head when you saw Meltzer's tweet earlier today about, a certain WWE exile possibly showing up at the Tokyo Dome. It's a pretty exciting time.
Who's that in reference to? Sasha?
Oh, Mercedes Sasha. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
it's particularly his tweet was that this was not being done through WWE, which is really, like, it's one thing they had already reported that they were interested in having her show up, but he said that he heard the same thing, and also that it's not being brokered through WWE, because as far as the Bushi Road were concerned, she was a free agent.